One thing is for certain, based on the specs shared by both Sony and Microsoft, it's evident that the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X will offer substantially more graphics and processing horsepower than the 8th generation consoles, whether we're talking about the mid-generation refreshes or the 2013 originals. An upgrade to in-game graphics is most definitely on the table. This has been amply demonstrated by the 9th gen in-engine we've seen so far. Halo Infinite, Godfall, and Hellblade 2 all feature visual effects that are well beyond anything we've seen till date this console generation. Moreover, we know that at a technical level, both the PS5 and Xbox Series X will deliver more. This generation's target is 8K resolution and refresh rates of 120Hz and beyond. Image quality and the visual composition of a given scene, the mesh complexity, object density, texture resolution, and shader effects will all be substantially above and beyond what's possible on the PlayStation 4 or Xbox One. CPU power is the big step forward for 9th gen consoles. But the question then arises, what else will be different? Arguably, the biggest change moving from the 8th gen consoles to the 9th gen consoles is in terms of processing power. The 8th gen consoles and their mid-generation updates were cursed with frankly terrible CPUs. These were built on AMD's Jaguar microarchitecture, a low-profile design meant for tablets, netbooks, and bottom-of-the-barrel desktop CPUs. To put this into perspective, in 2014 AMD was selling the Athlon 5350 with 4 Jaguar cores for a little over $50. Sony and Microsoft paired these CPUs with GPUs that were an order of magnitude more powerful. The PS4's GPU, as a matter of fact, performed on par with the Radeon HD 7870, an enthusiast-level graphics card from 2012. Not a bad place to be at all. With the arrival of the mid-generation refreshes, the gap in CPU and GPU power widened even more. The Xbox One X featured a 6 T-flop GPU that was on par with the RX 580. It was, as a matter of fact, faster than the GTX Titan, the fastest commercially available graphics card in the year 2013 when the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 released. The Xbox One X effectively paired the worst processor of 2013 with a GPU faster than the very best $1,000 prosumer option. While the gap with the PS4 Pro wasn't quite so great, the overall approach remained the same. Pair a genuinely powerful graphics card with a laughably weak processor. Jaguar CPUs held 8th gen GPUs back. This top heaviness had major implications for video game design over the course of the 8th generation. For starters, it meant that 60 FPS experiences were the exception, and not the norm. Even in cases where the GPU wasn't a bottleneck, the 8th gen console CPUs simply could not spit out frames fast enough to power 60 FPS experiences. A case in point here is 2014's Alien Isolation. On PC, this game was a marvel. It looked spectacular and ran smoothly on literally any hardware configuration. GPUs like the 750 Ti, which is weaker than the PS4's GPU, had no trouble running the game at a more or less locked 60 FPS. Thanks to their underpowered processors though, the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 both had to do with a 30 FPS lock, with occasional frame rate dips below. In more recent years, the Xbox One X has struggled to deliver consistent frame rates as well. In some games that should have no trouble whatsoever hitting 60 FPS with Xbox One X class GPU hardware at high settings, fails to maintain a 60 FPS lock, even at 1080p. CPU limitations restricted gameplay innovation. Poor CPU performance has more of an impact than just reducing in-game frame rates. The 8th gen console's anemic CPU power has constrained developers, restricting them from truly building on the open-world paradigms introduced in the previous console generation. Early on, developers like Ubisoft experimented with 8th gen console hardware to deliver gameplay experiences that weren't possible in the previous generation. Assassin's Creed Unity is a great example of this. It features a depth of detail and sheer environmental scale that is well beyond anything the Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3 could muster. The game's crowd simulation system was supposed to be its crowning glory, delivering a true next-gen experience. Instead, it was the reason why the game became a critical failure. Gamers and critics alike derided Unity for its terrible performance. On console, frame rates often dipped below 20 FPS in areas with high population density. This wasn't as much of an issue on PC. Enthusiast 2014 machines were quite capable of delivering a solid experience at 1080p. But on consoles, the Jaguar CPUs just couldn't keep up. No game in the mainline Assassin's Creed franchise since then has delivered the kind of crowd density seen in Unity. Elsewhere, when franchises moved to the 8th generation, graphics improved significantly, but core gameplay mechanics changed very little, if at all. Rockstar's Grand Theft Auto V and Grand Theft Auto IV offered rich, immersive world simulation on 7th gen hardware. Even to this day, open-world titles don't go deeper than these games at a mechanical level. The simple reason behind this is that the 8th gen consoles don't have the processing power to enable deep, immersive gameplay experiences. This is where the 9th gen consoles come into the picture. Zen 2, a generational upgrade to CPU power. The CPU upgrade on both the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X is nothing short of generational. Both consoles will be utilizing octa-core AMD processors based on the Zen 2 architecture. These will not only be clocked over twice as high as the current 8th gen consoles, they offer nearly double the IPC. This translates into over 4 times the raw CPU power. So what can developers do with these additional resources? What will they do? Well, looking at the Hellblade 2 demo, it's possible to get a rough idea of some of the ways developers might tap into the 9th gen console's CPU prowess. The trailer showcased distant shots with next to no LOD scaling, an impossibility on current 8th gen platforms. Minimal LOD scaling. For starters, LOD scaling and pop-up will likely become far more subtle or be removed entirely. Open-world titles on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One depend on aggressive LOD scaling and culling in order to render large, open environments at a more or less acceptable frame rate. There are only so many objects and interactions that the console CPUs can track on screen at one time. This means that assets in the mid and far distance are either simplified or removed from the scene entirely, only to reappear when the player gets closer to them. Pop-up is very noticeable and can completely break in-game immersion. Forests look lush up close if the PS4 and Xbox One render 2D tree billboards at a medium distance because of CPU limitations. A combination of a very fast SSD storage, which minimizes asset load times, and a much more powerful CPU will enable developers to minimize LOD scaling and unsightly pop-in the 9th gen open-world games. Environments will look pristine and detailed, well into the far distance. Advanced physics and dynamic environments. Physics interactions will likely also be much improved thanks to the added CPU power. Most 8th gen games implement ragdoll physics for in-game models and limited macro-scale destructibility. Most environmental assets are static. Asset culling due to CPU limitations means that even decals, like bullet holes, often fade quickly. In the 9th gen, we expect more games to feature granular environmental destructibility. This will fundamentally change the way first-person shooters play. Battlefield Bad Company and Battlefield Bad Company 2 gave us a brief taste of what this would be like. Fully destructible, dynamic cover that makes for emergent experiences. Linear FPS corridors will turn into miniature physics sandboxes. Increased environmental dynamism would mean that scripting also becomes much more complex. Complex AI interactions and procedural generation. We expect the 9th gen consoles to leverage advanced AI solutions for more dynamic NPC behavior. In-game AI hasn't improved much since the 7th gen. Fear, an FPS from 2005, still features more complex AI than the majority of 8th gen titles. Advanced AI is something we would very likely see. Apart from more dynamic behaviors in action sequences, we expect advanced AI to make NPC interactions much more meaningful. Context-aware NPC characters could generate unique conversations on the fly, going far beyond a selection of 2 or 3 canned responses. Quests and even environments could be implemented using advanced procedural generation, allowing for potentially endless replayability. Conclusion. In the 9th gen, CPU gains will mean that we will finally see games that not only look better, but play better as well. We'll see gameplay paradigms and a depth of gameplay interactions that are simply not possible on existing console hardware. This could lead to the development of entirely new subgenres. Needless to say, we're excited to see what the future holds. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.